Just one moment, we'll get started, and President Zarella will catch up with us and take over as soon as he arrives. Good evening and welcome to September 14, 2022 meeting of the Council as a Whole Committee. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this public broadcast. I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. All right, seeing none. At this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed in the silent mode so not to disturb the meeting. Tonight, I would ask Councillor Boschman to lead us in the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The public had been advised to contact the clerk's office regarding any comments of no more than 2 minutes, and no comments have been brought to our attention. But we do offer members of the audience to step forward and speak on any item on the agenda for not more than 2 minutes. Just please identify yourself by name and address, and you can go ahead and talk.
Can we do roll call first?
Oh, I apologize. Before we do that, we do have to do a roll call vote, or a roll call. I'm skipping ahead here. Madam Assistant Clerk.
Thank you. President Zarella. Councillor Boschman.
Here.
Councillor Kuchar.
Here.
Councillor Cragen. Here. Councillor Cruz.
Here.
Councillor Di Natale.
Here.
Councillor Fleming.
Here remotely.
Councillor Green. Councillor Schultz.
Here.
Councillor Squalia.
Present.
Councillor Van Hazinga.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, now I would like to welcome any members of the public who wish to speak on any item of the agenda to come forward to the podium.
Good evening, Council. Kevin Fitzpatrick, 23 Bridle Cross Road. I'm here in opposition of petition 222-22.
Thank you. I will make a note that that is actually going to be heard by the Legislative Affairs Committee following this meeting, but we will take your comment, and I think most of the councilors are here to remember that. This is a council in a whole meeting. We have some financial matters to discuss. Does anyone else have any other public comment? All right. So we'll move forward with our agenda. President Zarella has just arrived, so I will let him take over and take control of the meeting as we get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I apologize for being late. All right. So we are on 22422. Order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $136,206.03 from Reserve for Appropriation PEG Access and credited to Information Technology Franchise Fee for the purpose of paying FATV for franchise fees received during the period ending May 31st, 2022.
If I may start, Mr. President.
Go right ahead.
This is a change in process for how we handle the fees that are collected pursuant to the PEG access contracts. Back in 2016, the Department of Revenue issued a guideline that basically said PEG access revenue should be going to the city and be subject to appropriation because the contract is between the city and Verizon or the city and Comcast and not with FATV. And therefore, the disbursements of funds is the prerogative of the mayor and city council, similar to any other appropriation. The intention is not to make a change in where the money ends up. It's just in the process of doing it. And I'll turn this over to Trevor Bonilla, the IT director, for more comment.
Certainly. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Hello.
Whenever you're ready.
This is funding that we've given to FATV. We've negotiated on their behalf. Contractually, it's obligated to them is 4.5% of PEG. So subscribers for the two utilities, Comcast or Verizon, they get that 4.5% of whatever they make on our citizens, and that goes towards their overhead and their annual cost. So, I'm open to any questions, but this is money that we've always sent them. It's just it's going through the city budget now.
Make a motion, we accept.
I have a question.
Would you be willing to hold the motion for a moment? Your colleague has a question.
Are you asking me that question? Yes, I will.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Squalia?
I just, the entities that pay the 4.5%, can you just repeat that, please?
Verizon and Comcast.
Verizon
The
and
two
Comcast.
utilities, yeah, the two cable providers. And I wanted to correct myself, this is a quarterly payment, so we will be doing this every quarter.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I make that motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve Order 224-22. If there is no objection, we'll take this by unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. 225-22, ordered that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $393,000, same to be charged against the FY 2023 tax levy and credited to the following accounts. School expenses, $100,000. Highway personal services, $158,000. Parks personal services superintendent, $85,000. And employee benefits Medicare tax, $50,000. For the purpose of supplementing the FY 2023 budget approved in June 2022. Auditor Brooks?
Thank you, Mr. President. So we're having the mayor is submitting a supplemental budget this year, basically because when the legislature passed a final budget, the local aid included in the budget was more than what had been originally proposed by the governor. Traditionally, we use the governor's budget as our basis for calculating local aid from the state. So in fact, as you can see from the sheet I handed out tonight, that we received an additional $253,236 in local aid. There was also some adjustments, changes made in charter tuition reimbursements and school choice sending and charter school sending figures that changed the calculations for school indirect costs, which therefore changed the calculation of what needs to be appropriated to the school department to meet net school spending. We also had new growth that was a little higher than anticipated, so to make up the balance of the $393,000, we're using about $40,000 of additional new growth. That had originally been at $650,000, so this is using $690,000 in new growth. The expenses, basically the $100,000 is to offset the changes in charter, tuition, and school choice figures in the budget. The addition of a highway crew, which would be a 3-person crew of 1 working foreman and 2 laborers. Refilling the position of superintendent of parks and recreation. That was a position I understand that had historically been in the city and was eliminated 15 years ago maybe when the city was going through some financial straits and needed to reduce costs. And that work was absorbed by the highway superintendent. We feel it's time to split some of that back to give the park superintendent a more direct, or give the parks someone that is actually overseeing them directly. And finally, Medicare tax. This just puts the budget in a better alignment with what our actual fiscal year costs are anticipated to be.
Any questions? I have Councilor Giannatelli.
Thank you. So this is recurring revenue, which is why we're hiring personnel with it, correct?
Correct.
So the $158,000 for the highway.
Yes, sir.
Is that what Commissioner Erickson was talking about in the last budget cycle about needing a new crew or an additional crew? Is that what this is addressing?
Correct. Correct. I believe his initial request had been 4 people. This is for 3 people, which would fit into our additional revenue and gives him enough bodies to do some more work.
Well, three is substantial all at once, and I
Right.
know the DPW needs it.
Right.
So I'm glad to see that we're finally meeting that request. Some backstory on the superintendent for the parks, that was cut in 2009. Mayor Lisa Wong's first budget, we had the recession. That was one of the casualties to a whole boatload of budget cuts that we had to vote for. I was there for it. I believe the gentleman in that position, the person that was retiring, so it made it easier for the former mayor to just say, let the highway or even the recreation direct, let them absorb it in any way they can. And so it's been about 14 years since that point. And, you know, for those who are very focused on the upkeep of our parks, and it's very visible, it paints a picture of the city in some cases that may not be favorable to it because of how they look at times. So to have someone dedicated to the maintenance and upkeep, and more importantly, the longer-term needs of those parks, because some of this stuff costs a substantial amount of money. I see this position like the facilities manager, where this person's going to be there to identify issues, take inventory of all the problems, supervise. Will this person have jurisdiction over the Parks Department? Will they be managing the Parks Department? I see Gary shaking his head. So, because right now, up to this point, it was Highway that was managed.
The highway superintendent has been.
So this will also alleviate a lot of time off of the superintendent of streets to focus on streets.
Correct.
And so I just wanted to make it clear to the public that this is not a new position. This is a position we had many, many years ago that were lost due to the recession. And you can tell now with some of the conditions of our parks that we need it now more than ever to put a focus on it, because asking the rec director or the highway superintendent to look at it, it's not on top of their priority list. So I'm glad to see this be restored. And all this person's going to be able to do, in my opinion, is identify problems, put those problems before the mayor. Obviously, he or she will have no control over the funding. That's his chair. But at least now we have some renewed attention to those parks because we have so many of them. And I've said in the past that if we're not going to focus on that aspect of operations, then it's time to decommission many of these parks. Because if we're not going to maintain them properly, we don't need them. So I'm glad to see we're putting some renewed life into the investment of these parks and trying our best to direct more focused attention at what the needs are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to briefly note that in addition to what Councilor Gianatali just said, I think another thing, again, by analogy to the facilities manager, another thing that I would hope the superintendent will be doing is creating sort of a plan or schedule for ongoing maintenance issues, because you can get a lot more done if you know ahead of time which things you're going to need to fund.
This position, Counselor, will be my intent, and we still need to flesh out exactly how that's going to look, but we're looking at a proactive position, someone who, before the snow melts, already knows what's needed in those parks, and there'll be a punch list that he or she goes through to make sure that we make those needed repairs or upgrades before the springtime.
I like the sound of that. Councilor Boschman.
Could you tell me, Mr. Highway Department, how many men that brings you up to in the Highway Department? How many? 25. Okay. That's it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Councilor Squalia?
Thank you. I think this is a fantastic way to spend our additional unrestricted general government aid money. So thank you for putting this proposal to us. The director for the Parks Department, or the superintendent of parks, this superintendent will be the boss of the Parks Recreation Director, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when do we anticipate hiring for the director of parks or the superintendent of parks?
As soon as we can.
Within a couple of months.
I hope it doesn't take that long, but could be.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Councilor Squally mentioned, the additional $253,236, that's the unrestricted general government aid, correct, the UGA?
Yep.
And the reason we have that surplus is because the advocating of our state legislator, I believe, in coming in over the governor's proposed initial budget. So I just want to take a quick second to shout out that legislator for their advocacy for our municipalities and our state rep, Mr. Mike Kushmarek, as well. He can sometimes take a beating in this council, so I'd like to give him a shout out for the additional AGA funds that he advocated for. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments from councilors?
Move to approve petition
Second.
22522.
Thank you. I have a motion
The
and
order.
second to approve Order 225-22. If there is no objection, I'll take this by unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. Next up, we have the loan orders, and I believe there are presentations on this. Mr. Mayor? Were there presentations that?
Well, not for not for Crocker.
Okay, gotcha.
The presumption is they would each be taken individually.
Yes, of course.
We will have presentations for the library.
Okay, perfect.
Next, 22-7.
Mayor.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, right, come on up, okay.
I will note while they're getting set up, by the way, for the peace of mind of my fellow councilors and the audience, I am testing negative. I just feel like I'm coming down with something, hence,
Are you sure?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just figure there's no one sitting here who's going to say, oh, well, as long as it's not COVID, can I have some? You guys, if you have anything you'd like to, well, first I'll read off the order. This is 22622, loan order. This was order number 14321, which we passed in July 20th, 2021. Needs to be revised in its entirety to read as follows. That the City of Fitchburg appropriate the amount of $76,650,000 for the purpose of paying costs of an MSBA core project to construct a new Crocker Elementary School with grade configuration of 1 to 5 located at 200 Bigelow Road in the city, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, which school facility shall have anticipated useful life as an educational facility for the instruction of school children for at least 50 years, and for which the city may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of Crocker Elementary School Building Committee. To meet this appropriation, City Treasurer, with the approval of the Mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under MGL Chapter 44 or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The City acknowledges that MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any project costs the City incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the City, provided further that any grant the City may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 80% of eligible approved project costs as determined by the MSBA, or the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA, and that the amount of the borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the City and the MSBA. City Treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under Chapter 44A of the General Laws, any or all of the bonds authorized by this order, and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board may require for these purposes. Is there anything that any of you would like to add up front before I open up to questions from councilors?
You want to kick it off, Calvin?
So on this one, this is to add to the original loan order, and it's being done by deleting the previous loan order and putting in a brand-new loan order. You'll notice on both of these loan orders, it is for the full amount of the project. These loan orders are written to both authorize the project and to appropriate the funds to pay for the project. So they're done for the same amount of money. It's done that way so that if we have to borrow working capital to do the project because we're waiting for grant funding, we're able to do that. If we talk about having, say, MSBA funding, the amount being borrowed is not the $76 million, it's the $76 million less whatever the MSBA is reimbursing us. It'll be the same with the library project. It'll be the $40 million on that one less whatever grant funding we may get. So I just want to clarify that we can sometimes be talking about two different numbers. One is the total cost of the project, and the other is how much does the city have to pay out of its budget for that project?
Okay, Councilor Brochman. Oh, unless there's something else you'd like to add.
So,
Go right ahead.
thank you, councilors. I'd just like to provide a little bit more context. Tonight with me is Tony DeLuzio of Colliers Project Management. John Bates, our project manager, couldn't be here presently in person with us, so Mr. DeLuzio is, and he's familiar with the project. In addition, Jeremy Roach, our Director of Finance and Operations, is also with us, as he's also on the project team. So over the last year, since the council originally approved the $65 million loan order, something called inflation has been happening worldwide and particularly hitting the construction industry. Over the last year, we've received 2 additional cost estimates by professional cost estimators retained by Colliers MSBA. And that project originally went up about $8.5 million, and then the second cost estimate increased another $2.5 million. During that time period, we did additional value engineering. We identified about $900,000 of costs that could be value engineered out. The project managers and architects concluded that that was the most value engineering that could be done, and one of the things that was included in that list of value engineering was air conditioning in the principal's office areas and maybe some other common areas. So this project is actually very, I'll say, practically, but also aesthetically designed. I believe we have one of the lowest cost per square foot school construction projects in the state. Mr. DeLuzio can talk some more about that. And as the project managers, working closely with our architect, SOM Architecture, have been working very diligently to try to make sure that this project stays cost competitive in light of the current construction environment. So tonight we're before you requesting, excuse me, a little over an $11 million increase in the amount of the original loan order. One thing that the school committee just approved on Monday night is $5 million of school choice funding. That's funding that we received from other districts when students school choice to have their education in Fitchburg Public Schools. So we have about a little over maybe $3.5 million in that school choice account now, and assuming we don't touch any of the incoming receipts for the next couple of years, that fund will grow roughly by about $1 million, and we'll be able to contribute a total of $5 million. That amount was approved Monday night by the full school committee as a commitment towards this project to help the city make this project a reality. In addition, the school department, like the city, is a recipient of federal funding that was approved in Washington. City's funding is called ARPA. The school funding is called ESSER. We have about $9 million targeted of ESSER funding for capital improvements and security system upgrades. Those capital improvements include the replacement of unit ventilators in 3 school buildings, Rheingold, South Street, and Memorial. Those are all original 1960s systems and have outlived their useful lives. So we're in the process now of trying to get a project manager and designers for those projects as well. But the point on those funds, those $9 million, is those are potential capital obligations that the city will not have to be funding as we have the ESSER funding.
All right. Anything else to add? Well, thank you very much. I have Councilor Brochman.
Question on the school choice. What happens if you don't get the $5 million? What happens if you only end up with $3 million? Say you don't get in 5 years the $5 million, you only get $3 million. Who's going to take the cost up then?
Well, we already have $3.4 million.
You already get 3.4.
Yeah,
but
so
what
the
happens if you don't get the
annual
rest?
receipts for about the last decade have ranged around $1 million, $900,000 to $1.1 million. So we assume about $900,000 going into that account annually, and we'll be able to have that $5 million at the end of June 30th, 2025, which would coincide with the completion of the project.
2025?
Yeah.
June 30th? All right. Kelvin, what's going to be the city share on this project, 20 million? Is it going to be what? Not counting interest. Why don't we count the interest too? Because we have to pay that bill.
So what the city would have to borrow for this project is $29.1 million.
29 what?
29.1,
29.1?
correct.
Is that counting the interest that we have to pay back?
No, sir.
Huh?
No, sir. So in addition to the 29.1 million, there'll be interest payments. I've had to change my interest estimates in the last 6 months because previous, the beige sheet and the green sheet assumed that we would be paying 4% interest on this debt. I've been advised that if we went out to borrow today, we'd be paying closer to 5% interest.
That's without the Feds going up in the interest rate, right?
Well, it's 5% is anticipating that that's going to happen, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the bond markets look at, make a guess as to what they think the Feds are going to do when they buy our debt.
You're telling me, Bob, that this is cheap, we got the cheapest school going in the state per square footage?
One of the lowest cost per square foot. I'll defer to Mr. DeLuzio for that because he's involved with a lot of building projects.
Yes, thank you. Tony DeLuzio, Colliers. We're tracking in the lower 20 percentile of all of the current projects that are in the MSBA pipeline right now.
Now, can I ask you a question? Because I own a home. Are we putting in pretty good material? I mean, let's say a boiler. I remember the mayor got mad one day because we had to replace some of your boilers at the high school, and they didn't have them. The lifespan wasn't that high, if I recall right. Are we going to have good quality boilers and air conditioning units, or are we anticipated to say in 10 years from now, like a water heater, guaranteed to break down and be replaced at a cost of $1 million plus?
Well,
are they good quality? My question: are they good quality boilers? You got boilers here that you can buy on the market that are cheap, and you got boilers here that you pay more money and they last a long time.
we are at this point speccing and providing the best quality that we can get for keeping the project on track budget-wise. We are designing to LEED Silver standards. So at the completion of construction, you'll have a LEED Silver certified building. The equipment will all be commissioned accordingly. Many buildings today do not provide commissioning services. It is a requirement for MSBA projects that these capital core projects be commissioned by a third-party entity that they pick to oversee the installation, the specification, and the operational effectiveness of that equipment for you before you take ownership of the building. Also with these MSBA core projects, there is a post-construction 10 to 11 month period where that commissioning agent will come back and certify that the equipment is still operating, it's operating within its efficiency parameters, and you should see the payback over time for the equipment that's been specified.
All right.
All set,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Squalia.
Thank you. The pink sheet is great, but if we could get just a rundown of the numbers just for the public, that would be very helpful. So we're borrowing $29.1 million for the Crocker School project,
yes.
And the school is contributing, I heard $9 million from the school version of the ARPA, and $5 million they anticipate for 2025.
No.
Let me clarify. No, that's $5 million of school choice towards this project. The $9 million of ESSER, or on the city side, it's ARPA, are for other projects that are not on this list.
Other projects?
Yes.
Okay. Are we putting any of the SERP funding from the schools into the Crocker project?
Not from ESSER. Just we're using the school choice funds.
Just school choice funds.
Correct.
So the $29.1 million, and then the $5 million from the school, and
that's the $34.1 million, which is the city's share of the project costs, and then the balance would be coming from MSBA.
And the balance is coming from MSBA?
Correct.
Right. And, okay, and can you just, the BAN, that bond anticipation
yep.
note for $10 million in 2023, can you explain that, please?
So a bond anticipation note is just is a temporary borrowing. It's a one-year borrowing. All we would pay at that point are the interest costs. So this projection just assumes that this fiscal year, at the end of this fiscal year, we would be borrowing $10 million. Of the 29.1, we would be borrowing 10 to cover the costs we've incurred to date on the project. In fiscal year 24, we would probably temporarily borrow the 29.1 million. And on this schedule, we're borrowing it actually for 2 consecutive years because I don't anticipate the project being completed until, I think, sometime in fiscal 26 or 27. So we generally don't permanently borrow until the project is completely done.
We don't
You don't bond it. You don't permanently borrow until it's completely done. Then you know what your actual costs are.
We authorize it, and then we actually borrow it when the project's completed.
Yes. Yep.
So the $10 million will be borrowing at the end of fiscal year 2023, and then we will do a loan order for the full $29.1 million?
And then we would,
The next fiscal year?
we would do a ban for 29.1, yes.
Ban for 29.1.
And this is an example of what I talked about at the beginning, where the loan order is for 76 million. We're only borrowing 29. The other portion is coming from MSBA. And at some point, we do some housekeeping on my end, where there might be a rescission of a loan order that comes to City Council, asking the council to rescind the MSBA portion of the loan order so we can just take it off our books.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councilor Van Hazinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So I have 3 children, and they've all gone through the Crocker Elementary School, where one is still there, actually, for his final year. I myself, as a young lad, went there as a student, and I can assure you that this is a building that has reached the end of its useful life. My kids were students when they were forced to spend over a year in temporary schooling after the pipe broke. I've visited the office when they had to have canopies up to stop the roof leaks from going on their desks. This is a building that we just really don't have any choice but to replace. And we're already into the process. We have state funding. It does make it difficult that the building costs have decided to go up right when we're ready to pull the trigger on this project. So I appreciate your efforts to make this still happen, to do the hard work, to find a way to make it happen. And we are unfortunately going to have to borrow more money. You mentioned that there was about $900,000 in value engineering. Part of that was the elimination of the air conditioning. Were any other major systems or elements of the plan eliminated or changed as part of this?
And actually, we do have our architects from SOM, Diana Nicholas, Ed Bourget, and the project manager for Crocker, John Bates, joining us remotely. They weren't up on the screen earlier, so I apologize I didn't introduce them. So, I know John Bates, if you heard that question and if you're able to respond, because.
Yeah, and I would also defer to Ed to speak to the value engineering efforts that have taken place to date.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, the value engineering's been going on for quite some time. It's not something that we just did here with the escalation that we've been experiencing. We've done it since schematic design, actually, to continually try to keep things in cost. So along the way, some of the major items we've looked at, and they've been across the board. They've involved everything from finishes to the enclosure, the amount of windows, which can be expensive. The roofing, but I think some of the bigger items they involve the site. I think we took an attitude that you can always continue to build the site. You can always bring more amenities to this building, but we're starting with what MSBA believes to be a good working foundation for an elementary school, and you can always add to that with additional fields, additional, basketball courts, things like that. We certainly kept we've looked many times at the interior finishes and sort of reevaluated the basics. The durability was always the driving factor, but of course you can always cut back a little bit on some of the items, the amount of glass that's inside, and so for the amount of wood, so forth. So again, it's been across the board. It's been continuous, and I think more importantly, we've done this as a group. I think the design team would come to the table. We'd talk about it with the building committee every few weeks, along with John and Tony, and we got to where we're at. I think some of the big ticket items, like Tony mentioned, was the HVAC system. The AC it's not a cheap endeavor to provide that. So these are just, without getting too deep into the weeds, these are some of the bigger items that we've looked at.
So in terms of the air conditioning, is this something that 5 years down the line, after the building's completed, we have additional funds? Could we add a chiller and add air conditioning, or is this something that has to be built in differently to the design, so we have to decide now or never to do it?
Part of the complexity with the air conditioning is that you need to size the ducts that go into the building, into the infrastructure, to support the AC. So when we reduce the cost, we reduce the AC, we also reduce the size of these ducts. Now, having said that, what we're doing is when we go to bid, we have what's called an alternate. So we still have air conditioning, at least in the admin spaces and some associated spaces. It's still there, and we can evaluate where the bids come in. Who knows? When this thing goes to bid, maybe inflation suddenly drops a bit, or maybe the system isn't quite as expensive as we think now, and we can accept that. So that's an important tool that we can use. The other thing to keep in mind is, although the classroom areas do not have full air conditioning, the way that it's been designed, and I'm not a mechanical engineer, so I'll do my best to portray this, but there's a system there that lowers the humidity and circulates the air, including each classroom having a fan, a ceiling fan, so that there's a higher level of comfort on humid days, warmer days. It's not full AC. I'm not trying to, sell anybody on that. But within the budget, we're still providing what we believe to be a very good alternative to having full-blown AC.
All right. So Mr. Burgett hit on my next question, is that what flexibility do we have in terms of timing? Right now, that over the past year, there has been a tremendous rise in inflation in building costs, but there has been some signs that's stabilized and has started to go back down. You've seen the price of lumber go down and other things. Some other things remain high. Is there any flexibility in waiting a little bit to see if price goes down and this is more manageable? Is it too big a risk to take, or what's the situation in terms of that?
Thank you. So as far as timing, we talked early on, 6 months or so ago, with the MSBA, with the design team, as well as the administration, about delaying the project, knowing that things were climbing as they were back when we were at schematic design development level. Taking a project and putting it on hold, the MSBA has you in their pipeline for where you need to be. That raised some concern on their part, that should you delay the project, you may run the risk of falling outside that pipeline and delaying it more. That was only on the project side. There are implications on the educational side that I would defer to Bob about what any kind of more delay in this project would be. Based on that, currently in the state under Chapter 149, which this project is being bid, projects over $10 million require pre-qualification of all the subcontractors and general contractors. We've started that process. We expect to have that process completed by October 5th. We'll know who all the subs are, plumbers, painters, HVAC, all those various trades, along with what generals have been pre-qualified as the general contractors for the project. Based on that, bid documents at the stage that the design team, engineering team have been working will be ready for bid in October, the end of October. So we expect to have full bids in hand by December, December 16th, thereabouts. So that's the timeline in order to meet the June 2025 date that Calvin mentioned earlier, having this building open for the new school year 2025. So that's our timeline right now. Delaying that, the estimators that we work with, the construction indices for Boston and Massachusetts and New England region, there are ups and downs that we've been experiencing, various trades, various building elements. You can look at electrical switchgear, the main distribution panels for any building. They're very long lead time right now. Delaying that, we don't know if that's going to continue to extend. In some cases, the lead time for that heavy equipment is over a year, 62, 75 months. So getting things ordered, getting them bid is one thing, getting them ordered and delivered is another. And so any blip in the schedule is very risky, not only on a cost but a total schedule impact point of view.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, that any delay or a pause right now would have to be a full year, factoring in the school calendar and the time we can do this work. And it would actually probably increase us or expose us to increased risk rather than reduced risk.
Correct.
Okay. I guess my last question is in regards to the MSBA funding that was originally based on our cost estimates before the inflation exploded. Are there any opportunities to go back and reevaluate with MSBA or to seek additional awards or anything like that?
We have held several conversations with MSBA leadership, and the bottom line is the grant amount of $42 million is a fixed amount. There is no opportunity to go back and whatever as you were reading the loan order, but whatever the approval grant amount is, that dollar amount is fixed.
That's disappointing because if their business is getting schools built, they must understand that this has been an extraordinary time. That
They don't care.
They don't care?
Nope.
That's sad.
It's true. I mean, I don't want to be flippant about it, but it's true. And I've had discussions with Jack McCarthy one-on-one because I've known him for years. It's just not going to happen. It is what it is. They haven't increased. What's the square footage cost that they provide now?
$425.
And that hasn't changed in how many years?
They had I believe, a $30 square foot increase 2 years ago.
Okay. That's really where the problem lies.
So this is the best situation we can have in the circumstances we're facing right now. So I applaud you for all your efforts to keep this project moving forward in these times and making sure it be possible. Thank you very much.
Councilor Fleming.
You're muted.
Thank you. A couple of my questions have already been asked and answered. I do have a question in terms of the size of the building. We're seeing an increase in people coming into the city, and we've sort of outgrown our high school a little bit. Are we planning on increasing the square footage of this school to anticipate increase of students? I think I asked this. I can't remember the answer. I asked this before.
The enrollment of the proposed project will have a larger enrollment than what the school holds now.
Okay.
And we have had 2 rounds of enrollment studies performed over the last 4 years in connection with this project. One by the MSBA, and then actually we thought their enrollment projection was too conservative, and we had another study performed that was more consistent with what's actually happening in reality. So we are not facing an enrollment decline as other districts are.
Right.
Yeah, and I could speak to that specifically, too. The current enrollment is approximately 630, still early in the year, where there may still be students registering. And the projected enrollment for the new building would be approximately 840 to 845. In addition, the staffing capacity would be greater by, I believe it's 35, because the current staff's just under 100, and in talking to John Bates recently, it's 135 for the new building.
Thank you. I also want to add that at the last meeting, my concern was the cost increases, which obviously we have the cost increases, which is where we're back at the table here. I'd like to see this project get started sooner than later so that we don't have the increases just keep coming and coming, and that you have to keep coming to us to get more money. I'd like to see it just start and get going, and let's move. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Actually, can I ask you real quick to just put your digital hand down? Thank you.
I thought I did.
Counselor Gianitali.
Thank you. The estimation on costs, how firm are those from these cost estimators? I mean, the concern amongst the council is we understand the project increased $11 million. Anyone with a pulse the last 2 years knows why and shouldn't be surprised by it. When we have a presentation like this that says 7665, I almost feel like we got to go through the bidding process, the procurement process. We don't have any quotes from any contractors, right? This is just cost estimations based on market analysis of what things cost right now?
Correct.
So there is no guarantee then that when we put this out to bid, who knows when we're going to put it out to bid, these companies aren't going to charge what we're pricing. I know I can go for any project, but in this specific era where costs are going up literally by the month, I mean, how much contingency was put into that estimation?
So to answer your first question, this is why the MSBA, who does many of these projects, Colliers does many of these educational projects as well as SOM. There are probably 4 or 5 estimators in New England that do 90% of the K-12 project estimates. They are in tune as much as they can be with the daily market rates, the fluctuations. They're tracking projects from schematic design through the bid phase period. We depend on their tracking ability to bring that knowledge to the table. As a process, SOM brings on an estimator. MSBA requires that we bring on a third-party estimator on your behalf. They go off in a vacuum. They go through all their notes, records, similar projects, what drywall costs, what windows cost, what roofing costs. They do all the quantity takeoffs down to every square inch of carpet, square yard of carpet, feet of drywall, whatever it may be. We bring them back in a room, and this just happened on Tuesday this week, where we bring those estimators back. We, Colliers and SOM, look at projects that we have ongoing that those estimators may not be involved with. We look at what change orders are coming in on other projects, what conduit prices are tracking, what are carpet tracking on other school, and we have what's called a reconciliation meeting. So at the end of that process, you've got as much current data as we can possibly have. Is it a guarantee that that's the number? No. Every estimate has a design and price contingency in it. Generally at this stage, we're about 10%. We also know that every project has change orders in it. No set of documents is going to be 100%. Nobody ever moves into their home or any building without wanting something changed before they move in, right? So this project currently has $5 million in unassigned contingency as part of that $76 million.
And what's the risk of the use of that contingency? I'm going to have to assume there was an analysis done on risk, considering this is going to be a brand new facility built from the ground up.
Right.
We're not tearing, an existing facility down or gutting it inside, and then, oh, we didn't see this through the walls or the floor. This is a brand-new build. So is the risk lower because of that type of a project where it's a new build instead of a renovation?
The risk is lower on, so of the 76 million, right, there's 60 million in building construction, let's say. Of that, maybe 10 million is site work. That's very risky. You're all familiar, you mentioned your children all go there and you're all familiar with it. It's a very kind of unlevel site. There's 3 different levels to it. We've done a number of borings out there, which you go out there with a drill rig and you poke around. Ledge can be very undulating. You might find it, you may hit it at 20 feet, you may hit it at 40 feet. When we get out of the ground, that is the minimization of our maximum exposure. If we miss a crop of ledge that we end up having to blast 300,000 cubic yards of ledge because it was unknown in its undulating format, that's where we're going to attack that $5 million and utilize those funds. But you are correct that unlike City Hall, where as we took the building apart, there was 3 different major renovations that went on in there over 3 different periods of time, structure that had been modified that needed to be repaired. We won't have those kinds of exposures in the new building. We do still have to take down the old building. We have a massive amount of site work to conduct, not only to build this building, but to build the associated parking, to tear down the existing building. So there is some exposure there. But $5 million, I wouldn't suggest that we carry more than that. That would be outside the norm.
Okay, thank you. And just lastly, the scope of this project of $76 million. People may think, wow, for one build. I mean, isn't the city of Lawrence building a new high school?
Lowell.
And I read in the paper that that project's $315 million for just a high school. Yep. So, for the public's context, one high school in Lowell is 3 or 4 times more expensive than this project. And it's just the magnitude of cost. When you look at one building costing $76 million, it also paints a picture of why it is difficult to renovate or build new school buildings without the state's assistance because of how massive the cost is. And what we all thought would be 80% reimbursement from the state, we would tell our constituents that. I know I did, and my fault, I didn't anticipate this. I forgot that it's 80% of eligible costs, and also in their, my colleague here won't like this, but the legislature's infinite wisdom, the state likes to create programs that they don't fund. So the cap hasn't been raised in 9 or 10 years per your presentation last time, and 1 penny of the state sales tax goes to the MSBA, 1 penny. That hasn't been raised ever. And yet I read in the paper today that they're wrestling over there of what they're going to do with $3 billion in surplus. It's almost like they're giving us the double-barreled middle finger, and it really upsets me. So for the taxpayers of this city to understand, what we anticipated would be 72% or 80% is really 55%. And most of those costs were non-eligible costs. And to answer Councilor Boschman's earlier question, are you assuming a 4% interest rate or a 5%? So a 5 in 20 years? So $29.1 million borrowed at a 20-year loan, 5%, is just north of $46 million. So the interest is about $16 million.
16 million?
16 million on top of the 20, so it's about 46 million total when all is said and done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Cragen.
Thank you. Yeah, I had questions that have also been answered, but I just want to thank you all for coming here, because we would not have this opportunity had we not done the school building repairs over a long period of time. And I think that I also just wanted to say, and I certainly didn't come up with this, but this is not a financial decision. This is a value-based decision. And this is a decision that we get to stand behind for the children of Fitchburg for the coming decades and generations. And it is not often that we get an opportunity like that. And I feel like the numbers that we're talking about and the way that they translate to a building that right now is in, software and in people's imaginations is going to be very exciting moving forward. I also want to remind my colleagues on the council that in 2016 we gathered a group of community members for the very first time to talk about what the new Crocker School project would look like. And so much of what was discussed at Fitchburg State that day is in the final project. And it is very unusual to see teachers who wanted, access to the out of doors and making sure there was space for kids who were on the spectrum to be in a safe place within the school that was not, that was not designed for them to be safe, that was not a hallway or the end of a room or something. So a lot of educators put their ability into the discussion, and that will never show up on a balance sheet, but that is present. So thank you.
Councilor Schultz.
Yeah, I had a question. Ed mentioned that if the bids come in low, we'll be able to put things back. I would imagine the building committee has established a list, and I think by state law, the project has to put those things back in that order. Is that true, Tom?
That is the list that Ed was talking about as alternates. When we go to bid, we need to put those alternates in order with the building committee in the order of preference, and you would need to take them in the order.
Can you share with the council what the order is?
Ed, do you know what the list is currently? I don't think we've itemized them in order yet, but we do have a list.
Yeah. So it's to be honest, it's relatively small because we've cut so much out. But we do. I think the biggest one is the air conditioning going back in. That's number one. There's another one that goes with the HVAC system. So those are identified as alternates. I think if the money comes back in, what's probably equally as important, and they're not formal alternates, but we have a full-blown site design that includes, the basketball courts, the soccer field, the nets that go with it, and so forth. We have that. It's not part of the base bid because, again, with budget, we are planning for it, but it's not going to come right now. So I think if these bids, if we're fortunate enough that these bids do come in below where, things are expected to come, that's probably the biggest place where we're going to start. We can look as a group to start putting money back to get these things back into the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fleming, I had your hand up again. Was that correct?
Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions or comments from councillors?
Move to approve loan order 22622.
Second.
I have a motion and second. As this is simply the committee as a whole recommendation and not the formal approval, I'm not going to take this as a roll call vote. I will ask if there is any objection. Seeing none, it is approved by unanimous consent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have loan order 227-22. City of Fitchburg appropriate $40 million for the renovation of Fitchburg Public Library, including without limitation the demolition and reconstruction of the children's library portion of the building, all fixtures, equipment, furniture, paving, and landscaping for the project, the cost of moving the library to temporary space, and all other costs incidentally related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow up to $40 million under MGL Chapter 44, Section 7, Sub 1, as amended, or any other enabling authority, and that the mayor is authorized to contract for and expend any federal aid, state aid, or other funds available for the project, provided that the amount of the authorized borrowing shall be reduced by the amount of such aid and other funds received prior to the issuance of bonds or notes under this order, and that the mayor is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out this project. The city treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under Chapter 44A of the general laws, any or all of the bonds authorized by this order, and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board may require for these purposes.
Good evening, Council. Hi. My name is Matt Bruin. I'm proud to be the chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Fitchburg Public Library. I'm joined tonight by other members of my board, as well as the building committee and representatives from the project managers and the architect, as well as Director Deb Hinkle for the library. So thank you for this opportunity. I know we have a brief presentation to make, so I'll keep my prefatory remarks short, but I just wanted to preface this by saying that the public library has been a major attraction in downtown Fitchburg for many decades, thanks to the dedicated service of its staff and volunteers. But if you'll pardon the library pun, it is overdue for some renovations and repairs. So with the project as designed, having been approved by the State Library Building Commission for a major grant, and with the generous allocation of ARPA funds from this council earlier this year, we are now in a position to realize this project to the fullest. So the plans that you're going to see tonight will create a library space that will serve the evolving programmatic and technological needs of the community for many decades to come. It will be yet another destination unto itself as we move towards the renaissance of downtown Fitchburg. So I want to thank you on behalf of the entire board for the support the council has shown for this project so far, for the council, or for the support from Mayor DiNatale and his administration, and we look forward to sharing some information with you and answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you can all proceed with your presentation as you are prepared.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Hoover of Tappe Architects. He's going to provide the presentation on the current design status. Jeff, I think you're able to share. We've asked earlier. You should be all set.
All right. Thank you, Tony, and members of the City Council. I have a brief presentation. We'll just outline sort of the basic project parameters as a review. Many of you are already familiar with the basic project. Starting with an overview image of the library site and context and arrangement of buildings from various vintages of modernist construction. I'll just go into the different areas of sort of the project as is planned now, pivoting around to a slightly different view, and then bringing up a sketchy model that shows just the basic configuration of the existing building and identify the parts that we are going to be removing and rebuilding in new configuration and new quality of construction. So it's the children's library area, the youth library auditorium will be coming off, as will the bookmobile garage on the far end, as you see here. And then that leaves what we call the Wallace Building, and that is the sort of the iconic building on Main Street. That piece will remain, and then we'll add on to it a new two-story connecting link, and that will connect us to a reconstructed youth library and also a community conference center and a large community meeting room. And underneath that, there's a half basement or three-quarter basement that really houses most of the administrative and service functions of the building. There won't be public spaces on the lower level. All the public spaces will be on the main level and upper level of the Wallace Building. So it's essentially about a two-story addition onto the three-story Wallace Building, and sort of pivoting around to additional view, and then bringing up the model to another level to give a little bit more sense of the character of the building as it has developed, which is coming to the end of design development, the design development phase of the traditional phases of architectural services, and next would be moving forward into construction documents. And you see in the foreground sort of the reimagined and rebuilt youth wing or youth library part with meeting room in the foreground, and then youth library proper beyond, and then the Wallace Library in the background. And looking at that from the corner of Newton Place and Main Street, obviously the Wallace Building in the foreground here, and you see just the configuration of the building as it goes sort of back and down the street and downhill down the site of Newton Place, pivoting around to going farther up Main Street towards City Hall, looking back towards the library. This is the configuration of the building you can see from here. And you can see that the youth library, and again, is sort of in the background, is a much larger facility than is currently available on site, a dramatic improvement in services for children there. Coming down to Street View, sort of before and after images of the building, again, looking at it from sort of up towards City Hall, looking back down Main Street. You can see the bookmobile garage now removed, and you can see the youth library beginning to come around at that end. Coming back down Main Street to Newton Place, the view of the building from that corner, mostly a renovated and restored Wallace building in the foreground with a few changes on the exterior, and more or less a comprehensive renovation of the interior, both in terms of spaces and building services, all new systems for the building. Another view from Newton Place looking at the older youth library at the bottom and the replacement facility above. We'll also be creating a new entry point. There's still the entrance on Main Street that will remain. This is another entry on Newton Place, an inviting sort of plaza area to come into the building at that point. And then a couple of interior views here in the sort of the reimagined children's library, sort of recreating the kind of open space attribute that the original youth library had once upon a time, adding to that a good and enlarged story hour facility. And comparable to that in another way is the community meeting pavilion, which is 150-person capacity, subdividable, with all the sort of latest meeting technologies incorporated. And then in the Wallace building proper, here's a couple of historic images from shortly after construction was complete. A lot has changed, but we really are going to be doing mostly a restoration project there and renovation. We are taking out most of the partitions that exist up there. This is our model view, and replacing them with new configurations that meet the library service needs going forward. A couple of renderings at the lower level of the Wallace building, and then looking above renovated space for adults and teens on the upper level as well. On the outside, in the courtyard, which is one of the really critical assets that the library has to offer, is the outdoor space. That is going to be comprehensively renovated as well, retaining some of the original character, but a new landscape plan and also a new way in from parking on the off of Main Street coming into the entry area that we saw from Newton Place. You can also approach that from parking on the opposite side as well. So that's a kind of an overview of what we're doing. I do have the floor plans themselves we could look at in more detail if anybody should like to. I think I could pause here and turn it back over to the people in the room there to continue the discussion. I'll be available to show more images. Well, just show that I have the floor plans also remaining here that we could walk through if you'd like.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for the design team?
Councilor Squalia?
Thank you. Will this library project have outside commissioning, like a third-party commissioning, like a LEED certification or anything?
Yes. The project does have commissioning in it. It's part of the Mass Board of Library Commissioners requirement. They also fund some of those sustainability efforts, but we do have to provide for the commissioning of those systems. It's currently included in the budget.
And do we anticipate a LEED rating, or is LEED the commissioning system that is prescribed in the library commission?
LEED is the standard, whether it's silver or platinum. That is what we are working towards. We've had a couple of meetings going over the various, quote, LEED scorecard of where we are and what we're including. We have not wrapped that up yet. This project currently, as you can tell, from the stage of design, we're in a design development, so we haven't progressed to the same state as Crocker is. Crocker is ready to go to bid. This project is not going to bid. Bid documents will be complete if we proceed with the project timeline in April of 2023. So we've got a long ways to go to get there. We'll have many more meetings over which systems and what level of lead we can afford within this project.
In the original project proposal in 2016, there was an additional story added to the Wallace Building, correct?
No, but there was the addition at that time. The addition proper was had 3 stories, and we've revised the design to make the addition only be 2 stories in this case. But the Wallace Building itself has never had an additional story put on it.
And the outside facade of the existing Wallace Building, is that getting completely rebuilt?
It is extensively rebuilt. The window systems would all be replaced. The curtain wall systems would be replaced. Where there are existing brick panels, we're not going to take them down and put them back up again. We are going to leave them in place and improve them in terms of their thermal performance from the inside. So we maintain a lot of the existing exterior character as a contributing building in the historic district. That was important to the Fitchburg Historic Commission.
And the existing heating and cooling systems, or the proposed heating and cooling systems, what exactly is that? What is the plan for that?
A comprehensive replacement of existing systems with modern, high-efficiency components and system design. At the turning point we are at the end of design development, we have a system in mind. Our engineers have a system, for design for. As we go into the next phase of design development, which is securing the cost estimates, then we will go into probably the value engineering phase, and building systems such as those will be ones that we'll consider, for whatever is going to be the most cost-effective solution that keeps us within budget while still delivering the kind of energy performance and longevity that the city's going to look for from this building.
Okay. And the estimated time of construction, design completion, construction, finished project?
So I'll weigh in on that one. Currently, we're working under working through the application for CM at risk, which is the project construction delivery method that was utilized for City Hall. We've started to have some of these same early conversations. This is a very tight urban site. There's a lot of work to go on. There's adjacent businesses. So we want to give the city that option of going CM at risk. Under the CM at risk general laws of the state, we have to apply for it. If we are granted that approval, the city always has the opportunity to not use CM at risk and go with general bid, which is what we're doing for Crocker. Right now, we want to have both of those options available to you. It will allow us to start meeting with CMs and talking about things like real-world costs versus estimators, long lead items. How do we take this very complicated exterior shell and modify it? So we think there'll be some benefit there to schedule. But bringing the CM on board may also impact costs because we're bringing another team member on earlier in the project. So we're looking at that. Generally, construction for what we're looking at here is 18 to 24 months of construction, but bringing a CM on board will give us a better opportunity to understand where we might pick up some time in that effort.
So potentially 2026 finished construction?
Correct.
A realistic?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Figuring if we have bid documents in April, if we don't already have a CM on board and we're not going to go that way, there's probably 2 to 3 months for the bid process before we would award, and then we'd be looking at the 24 months from that period. So that would put you out to 2026.
Okay, thank you. And final question for Calvin. Assuming that the $40 million is enough for the library, that would be wonderful. And what is our contingency for the city if the prices go up? How do we pay for it?
Well, at this point, I would say to the project team that there's $40 million to spend. Right, Tony?
Absolutely.
And that's just what it is. It's the budget. The city really doesn't have any wiggle room on this.
And just to add to that, similarly to the MSBA, the Library Commission that is funding that grant, they've locked in their amount. They're not going up and down. As the mayor had indicated with the Crocker project, we've looked at every outside source. Both of those entities, the Board of Library Commissioners and the MSBA, they've got requests all over the state. You know, whether you're looking at Lowell, Lawrence, schools that everybody's dealing with the same budget constraints and the same inflation. So those granting entities, they just don't have the ability to increase their amounts on an ongoing basis. So we are locking in today at the 39. If we need to start looking at, again, different finishes, different ad alternates, that will be the process that happens between now and April.
So the $40 million total, $12.5 million from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, $6 million from the ARPA. We've already allocated another $6 million from ARPA that we will allocate, and then $3.5 million that the library will raise, the library trustees will raise.
Basically, yes. It's 6.5 from ARPA that we've already appropriated. We need another 5.5, so it'd be a total of 12. And this is again where I would just point out in terms of what the loan order does. It's $40 million. It's authorizing the project for the full 40, but allows us to use other funding sources if we need to. And again, at the end of the project, we could come back and ask for rescinding part of the loan authorization because it won't be needed.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Van Haziga.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the rebuilding of the library is an opportunity to inject new life into a building that's reaching the end of its life again. But it's also an opportunity to reinvent the space and how it's currently used. I imagine the Wallace Library right now is used a lot differently than it was when it was first built. And I wonder if just briefly the library director, the former director, could comment on how the design incorporates how use of the libraries, for books or public spaces, has changed with this plan and how it's going to be utilized.
I'll take that. Deb Hinkle, I'm library director. Library needs have changed a lot since the 1950s and 60s when the Wallace building and the youth library were built. As technology continues to increase, libraries are transitioning more to a people-centered destination as opposed to solely collection-centered institutions. Along with providing our core library services, we're expanding, and the library has become a community center with additional space needs. I always like the saying that we are the people's palace. Ultimately, this proposed renovation and expansion of the library will provide a much more efficient use of space. Libraries exist to provide technology and programs that promote learning. Libraries offer programs in technology, career, and college readiness and entrepreneurship, which we will be able to execute through our updated technology and meeting room accommodations. They provide financial literacy training and job search assistance. In collaboration with the literacy program, the library also serves non-English speaking immigrants, and we also serve the homeless and homebound population. I think that with this library renovation, we will be able to not only assist with the refresh initiative of Fitchburg city development, but we will also be able to provide a place for the people of Fitchburg, no matter what shape or form they are in.
And I think that's very encouraging that it's really being designed as a public meeting space, because that's something that is so sorely needed in the city, that we have so many events, meetings, everything. It always needs a place to meet. And it can be challenging sometimes to find a suitable venue that is large enough to host larger events or larger meetings or forums or things like that. So I think this will be another great resource that will help bring people to downtown to engage civically. So this 18 to 24 months is a long construction period. What is the plan during that construction period to keep the services and the amenities open and available to the public?
Sure. We will be operating in temporary quarters in a reduced fashion. We will still offer all the amenities that the people of Fitchburg absolutely need, meaning internet, whether that's with our public access computers or our Wi-Fi. We'll have the entirety of our children's and young adult collections. We'll have a subset of our adult collection, hopefully with the remainder of it being in accessible storage. If not, we're a member of the largest library consortium in the state. So we have 144 other libraries to rely on to get our residents their items.
Now,
we are happy to report that the FRA is providing the needed space for the library when we relocate across the street. Storage is still something that we're working on, which won't be necessary until probably April or May of next year.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor. We looked at plans today. It's fresh. It's not really out. We've just gone through our first pass of what the layout of the FRA space would look like, and everybody was very pleased with not only the amount of space that's available, but the amount of program that will remain available throughout the project in that space. It will certainly reduce the amount of off-site kind of archive collection that needs to take place. Getting that temporary space set up, we're targeting a November 15th, 1st to 15th date to have the new temporary space set up. At that point, as the mayor said, we can leave a lot of the stuff that's going to remain or move to archive in the existing library until much later. As I said, the bid documents aren't going to be done until April of 2023. So we don't have to relocate all of it right away, but we want to get the operational aspects relocated to the FRA space and be available for the community as soon as possible.
I also want to take the opportunity to thank the FRA, Megan Donahue, and the FRA board for their, they really stepped up and helped us as partners in the community. We're very, very appreciative and thankful for that.
Councilor Squally had mentioned that the $3.5 million in fundraising is a key component of financing this project. And I was wondering if we could just share some more information on that, because, the Wallaces and the Crockers aren't around anymore, and I'm just, is this
We're
a
going to
real...
be passing the hat tonight.
Because I just want to make sure as we make these plans that
Guys
this is
bring your cash today?
a realistic, a realistic goal to raise this amount of money.
I think what I'd like to, hopefully you guys are going to talk about increasing that maybe. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bernard, former library director, and I can speak to that in that we did meet in 2016 and did a feasibility study on fundraising, and that was what was determined we could raise. It's possible that 6 years later we could raise more, but $3.5 million is basically what we had determined, and that's through fundraising, other grant writings, things like that. So it's still in process. We're working with a fundraiser to help us organize everything and get it going.
So is the idea to contract with a fundraising coordinator or agency or something like that?
We're working with someone to advise us, and then it'll be up to the trustees and a fundraising committee to do the actual fundraising.
Okay.
Yes.
And the last item that I neglected to bring up during the Crocker School discussion too is that in this funding plan on the cherry sheet, or the pink sheet rather, is the use of stabilization funds in 2 years. And I was wondering, Mr. Brooks, if you could comment on that and explain how that's going to help us make this possible.
Yep, thank you. The pink sheet shows a schedule that is doable if the city wants to commit to doing it. It requires more debt service that has to go into the budget. If we tried to not tap into stabilization and do it, if I can say, on our own, the amount of increase for the next 3 years would be significant, $550,000 a year to get to the numbers we need to. And we're not, that's asking too much from our operating budget to do. So the intention here is to, for 2 of the fiscal years, to use stabilization funds to cover the shortfall as we continue to ratchet the amount of debt service in our budget, in the city budget. And using the stabilization fund, we aren't taking it out of what I'm going to call the true amount we put aside in terms of stabilization. My suggestion is that we, for the next 3 years, put $500,000 a year in to make it $1.5 million higher than what we normally would have done, to then take it out in the following couple of years. This, in my opinion, is an acceptable use of the stabilization fund. The bond markets are one of the important bodies that look at stabilization and make sure that the city has money put aside for a disaster, for an unexpected major expense, where we can just go in and grab some money and do something that has to be done that was totally unexpected. It also can be used to stabilize the tax rate in the sense that in fiscal years, I think, is it 27 and 28? I got too many lines here. Where we have kind of a bump in the debt service. And so if we put money aside ahead of time to cover that bump, it then helps us on the other side, because once we get past that bump, we can manage it ourselves. I kind of liken it unto if you have 3 kids and they're all in college the same year in one given year. As long as they're spread out, one graduates and one goes into college, you're fine, but you might have 1 year where all 3 are in. That 1 year, you're going to be tapping your savings a lot more than you normally would want to, but it's a 1-year thing. The way it's supposed to work is one of the children graduates, and then you only have 2 left. And so that's what this is basically doing, is saying, okay, we've got a couple of years where we just have a lot of expense, and so we can put some additional money aside that allows us to cover that. It's not an unforeseen expense, it's a foreseen expense that we have made accommodations, that we have addressed in prior years, so when it hits, we're ready for it.
I can appreciate your analogy. I have 3 kids born within 4 years of each other, so that's, I'm going to have to face that question. So,
yes.
So I appreciate that. So the bump is going to smooth out as other projects come off our debt service payment schedule. Is that how that works?
It basically is a combination of the amount of debt service continuing to increase at about $300,000 to $350,000 a year for 3 more years, and then the debt service itself drops because we begin to pay down the original debt, so we have less debt outstanding and therefore lower interest costs.
Okay.
This schedule is based on the notion that you take the amount of, if it were a $20 million debt paying over 20 years, you're basically paying $1 million of principal a year, plus whatever the interest is.
And does this schedule still allocate sufficient borrowing capacity to address some other projects or smaller projects that we'll have coming up, such as, refreshing the police station, or I know the Superintendent Jokel mentioned that some of the other school improvements are going to be covered through other sources.
Right. So the school things right now are being covered through the ESSER grant. This assumes that there's going to be $3 to $4 million in police station work that needs to be done. If you look at the pink sheet, there's a box, and that basically represented budgeted capital spending. We've been using it for various projects. What we would have to do is commit to use those funds toward the police station project. And that could be done, and that doesn't include whatever free cash we may generate over those years as well. So we can do the police. This assumes that we could do the 3, I'm going to say, active projects we have, which is Crocker, the library, and the police station. After that, I think we're going to have to just take a break on city projects for a couple of years, because financially we won't be able to swing it. And I think that also is the limitation for us is not just the financing. It can also be the amount of staffing we have to oversee these projects. So I mentioned those three, but that doesn't include water projects and wastewater projects that continue to go along, which creates oversight work for the procurement department or for the auditor's department or for the treasury. And so I think we're biting off a lot. We need to work through that, and then in 5 years we can begin to say, okay, what's next? If you ask me what's next, I would tell you that the senior center is going to need some work. It kind of already does, but it's one of those things we don't have the capacity to deal with it right now. There's an issue with the cemetery beginning to reach capacity, and I think in 5 years it's an issue we're going to have to face. It's going to cost us a few $1 million. The third item is not really a capital item, but it's a money item, which is the solid waste costs. We have a landfill. We I believe, have enough expansion to run another 5 years. If the state doesn't allow us to continue to do an expansion or to do something else, we're then faced with losing that tipping fee revenue, and we're going to have to come up with a way to fund. If we're spending $3.5 million now, it could be $4 or $5 million in 5 years. And how do we do that? And it either can, we start cutting the budget to fund it, or my suggestion there would be to look at an enterprise fund and start to work fees that pay for that cost. That's 5 years down the road. That's going to be somebody else's problem, not mine. But that's how I would address it. So there are things that I know we're putting off, but this schedule does try and address at least the police station project, which is kind of the next one in line.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President. The majority of my questions have probably been answered for the most part, as an addition to your terrific memo, Mr. Brooks. I guess I just have a design question, if we could skip back to the library here. It's my understanding that internet can be an issue there because of the previous design. How will this design improve the high-speed internet function at the library, as it's an equity concern here in the city of Fitchburg?
I'm not sure. I couldn't understand you. Say again, please.
I don't know if we still have Jeff.
Jeff, are you on?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thank you.
Can you speak to the internet and technology design of the proposed building?
In a broad way, of course, we have an engineer on board specifically to ensure that we're providing, sort of the highest standard of accessibility to the internet. But I don't know exactly what the components that we're going to incorporate are. We have reviewed sort of the placement of, sort of the Wi-Fi modules that will be in the new and renovated parts of the building. So I anticipate that the ease of access and the speed of access will be a dramatic improvement over what is there now. But I can't speak directly to the particulars of what makes that happen, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you. I very much with these last two projects, I feel like I'm kind of coming in at the 11th hour as a first-term counselor. So it's, it was pretty clear that the previous one was going to go through by unanimous vote. And I think it's the right decision. It's time to replace that school. And you mentioned that in 2016 was the feasibility study. That was 6 years ago. About how long has the library been on, the renovations been on the radar? Like 15 or so years?
The project, we got a grant from the MBLC in 2005 or 6, I think, to conduct a study to prepare to apply for a grant. We wrote a lot of the program and got ready to do that, and then 2008, 2009 budget happened. Mm-hmm. And so we've been waiting since 2005, basically.
Right, and it's a need for the city and for the residents. It's my understanding that we still need $12 million worth of renovations regardless. And when was that determined?
That was probably 3 years ago, that figure was determined.
Right, so as we get an all test for the presentation from the school building, those numbers have probably gone up of what that would cost. So we either have a choice to take the grant from the MBLC and the loan order, or we throw a Band-Aid on it for somewhere between $12 and $15 million. And we use the ARPA funds. So I hope this one goes through unanimously again as well. It's got my full support. And if there's anybody still wondering, from my digging before, 126,000 items are circulated every year right now, and computers were logged into 600 times a week before the pandemic. That's 31,200 times a year. So for anybody out there watching who thinks that nobody uses the library, believe me, people are using it, and we need to continue to support one of the backbones of our community and get this done. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Councilor Giannatalli.
On the stabilization, it must be noted that what you're proposing is we save now, so when the bill comes due, we have it in there.
Correct.
So every year, the mayor has allocated $350.
Correct.
To keep us at the 5% DOR level.
Correct.
What you're proposing is, in addition to the $350 in the next 3 years, he's going to submit a request, if he chooses, which he would be foolish not to, add another $500,000 on top of the $350.
Correct.
That way, in 2026, when whomever the mayor is, or city council, or audit, whoever's there, that extra $500,000 times 3, once pulled out to pay that debt service in the budget, we're still going to be at over 5% of the DOR recommended level.
Right. We still, in theory, we still have been putting $350 a year in to maintain our position.
So basically, this has no impact on our ratings or our overview at DOR, because we're always going to have that 5%.
Right. I think with the rating agencies, this is actually a good thing to talk about, because it's saying we're thinking about what we're doing. We're planning ahead for some expenses we know we're going to incur. We're not letting it just ride until the year comes.
And this is a testament to how strong the city's finances are. And others may not agree with me on that, but I'm speaking from the context of when I was on the council in 2008. The fact that we were even able to do this is a testament to how strong the finances are right now. Because we could have, this is a good problem to have, that we can use this avenue. Because you look at 14 years ago, we couldn't even keep the library open. So I remember in the previous administration, we had these presentations. I remember former Councilor Joseph and I were very skeptical of the fundraising aspect. I'm still concerned about that. If not, that you can't, let's say you can get the $3.5 million, no one can tell us when you're going to get it. So my concern is not so much will you raise it, although that is a concern I have. What if it takes longer to raise it? We're talking more time, more cost increase, and as was stated earlier, this $40 million is a cap. And I believe 6 or 7 years ago, the number was around 31 and change.
Yeah.
So the costs on this project's gone up $9 million. So 31 and change was what it was when we had this discussion 6 or 7 years ago. And at that time, the city could swing $6 million in a loan. Now it's double, right? 12. So of the 40 million, we're going to borrow 12. Another 12 is coming from ARPA, 12.5 from the state. So we're borrowing 12. 6 years ago, we could only do half that. So back to the point of we're able to swing this because of how strong the budgeting and financial practices of the city have been. So there should be no concern on that front. What I will say is my children use this library every week. They love Miss Jane and Miss Molly's reading programs. They're there every Tuesday and Wednesday. My wife's only regret is that they're going to be probably a lot older at that point, with a whole new facility. They'll still use it, but, so the timing aspect of it. But, I see this project as another piece in downtown's revitalization. And it's long overdue, because I know Lunenburg has a new library, Leominster has a new library,
Ashby, Townsend.
Ashby, Townsend, so we're last. But it's also due to the fact that, hasn't the Library Board of Commissioners, maybe I'm not using the right word, but aren't they stalling? Every time I've talked to you, Sharon, you've said to me, we're 12th on the list. Now we're 10. Now we're 9. It's not. Is that anything to do with the commission, or is that other projects they're paying for that they Why is it taking so long for us to get?
Because at the first year when we applied, there were 33 applicants that were accepted, and they had to divide them out over time, and they knew Fitchburg wasn't ready, so we were 27th, I think, on the list at the time. And each year they offer the grant to somewhere between 3 and 7 libraries, depending on the cost. And so that's why each July we move down the list.
And the 12.4 million we're getting from them, is that a specific number, like a formula they came up with?
They based that on the application that we submitted, giving a cost estimate at the time with an escalation of, I think it was 3.5 years, price-wise. And so they do a percentage of eligible costs. They don't pay for landscaping or paving, for example. So it was about 42%, I think, is what they were paying at that time. And of course, that's all they have because that's what they're bonded for from the state. So they can't really offer anymore.
Okay.
And then it wouldn't be fair to offer more to us if the
Everybody else is going to.
last year they.
Well, again, everybody else is going through the same thing we're going through.
It's just
this is not a
unfortunately-
Fitchburg problem. This is a countrywide issue.
And when we applied, there were 33 applicants, which spread that out over a long period of time. And then COVID happened, which pushed everybody back a year. So they didn't even offer grants that first year. They offered it to libraries that were already in construction, that were further down the list. So that's why.
So I'm going to support this. I mean, I've been hearing about this now for 14 years. As you said, in 2005, we were talking about this. And since I've been on the council, we've talked about this every year. So imagine how long it's taken from that point for all those reasons stated. And so I see this also as a necessary piece of downtown revitalization. We have a lot of things going on downtown, will be going on downtown, and to have a modernized 21st century library is another piece of the cultural aspect and educational aspect we're trying to build downtown with the art, housing, the museum, other arts and culture that we're hitting the ground running on here. So it's necessary. And to anyone in the public who may say to me, you know, can you guys really afford this or not? The question is, yes, we can. But also, when you apply for and get state funding, it's like a grant in a way for equipment or something. It's very hard to give it back because what we've essentially done, and everybody does this, is you lock in. So if we don't do this, we're basically telling the state, take your $12.5 million and give it to someone else. And that's state tax dollars, that's our people's tax dollars. We want them here. So if we weren't going to do Crocker or the library, we're forfeiting $57.5 million in state tax dollars coming back to this city. So we have to make ends meet with our challenges that are not of our own making. And I'm glad to see that they have a plan to do so, and I fully endorse it because that's the purpose of stabilization. My concern would have been if we were not going to be over 5% once we take it out. The fact that we're going to save the normal amount of $350 and then some makes me sleep better at night because once we withdraw that money, we're still meeting the DOR recommendation of 5% or more. So it's just saving now for a future expense that we know will occur. And so I'm glad that we were able to get through this hurdle, and I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Schultz.
Yeah, getting back to Councilor Di Natale's question about the fundraising, the $3.5 million. Do we have a contingency? We have a contingency for the Crocker School of $5 million. Do we have some kind of contingency built in, Tony, into this budget?
We're carrying about 5% contingency on the $40 million.
So it's about $4 million?
$2 million.
$2 million. So hopefully we can raise somewhere in that range.
All set, Councilor?
I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Boschman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel entirely different than some of my fellow councilors on here because I feel like I'm tired of being poor. I'm tired of saying that we can't do this and we can't do that. We can't. And I'm really, to be honest with you, because I talked to Kelvin Brooks, the city auditor, and I've been talking to him, I was really disappointed with the board of directors for not starting the fundraiser earlier. Because the way I looked at it when talking to Kelvin, I said, well, maybe we can come out of this not charging anything. I was hoping the mayor would have gave $10 million this time around to you, Sharon, for your library. That would have been 16. With the 12.5, that would have been 28.5. And I figure you already started fundraising. I'm talking to Kelvin. If you can raise 7.5 million, we wouldn't have a bill. It would be paid for right off the bat. No bill, taxpayers won't have to worry. Now we got to take another loan out for 12 million. What's the interest going to cost us on that, Kelvin? Because it's not 12 million. When you tell us 12 million, it's not 12. Because when I pay my debit card, it's not so much money goes for interest. So how much are we paying back on interest?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Is it a 20-year loan, 5%?
5%.
12 million? It's a good thing I'm in capital investment here. Total would be $19 million, so $7 million in interest.
7 million in interest. 7 million in interest. That's a lot of money. We could do a lot of things with 7 million. I was hoping maybe the mayor in his wisdom would turn around and say, we're going to give you 10.5, because if the mayor comes back this time around with the opera funds and say, we're going to give so much money across the street, we're going to give money over here, I'm going to fight his tooth and nail, because it doesn't benefit everybody. The library does.
What do you think a third of the APA funds went to last time? The last tranche? Third of it?
A third?
Third,
6 million went,
third of the 14 million.
6 million went to them.
DPW.
3.5 million went to the DPW.
DPW. Yes. No.
Okay, we're not going to discuss ARPA allocations right now.
Well, Mayor, look at it my way. I'm tired of being poor. I'm literally tired of being poor. I'm tired of saying it to the public.
I'm tired of hearing you use that term.
Okay. No crosstalk, please.
Are you getting mad at me?
I'm telling you both that we can't go back and forth at each other like that.
So, I don't know where I stand on this position right now. If he would have gave you 10 million, I would have been trumping with joy, and I would have said yes right off the bat. But he only wants to give you 6 million. You're up to 12.5 instead of 12.5 is 25 million, and the rest we got to pay. And you're 3.5. Like I said, I was hoping you would raise between 7 and 8 million. I figured they always tell me about 10% over cost. I said they have an extra $3 million. That'd be great. Everything would be paid for. No bill from the library. We could pay off the city hall with the rest of the money. I mean, not the city hall, the police station with the rest of the money. No bill there. And we get rid of some of these bills. That's how I feel. That's the way I like it. I'm just a working man. Don't have a lot of money. And retired. And still don't have a lot of money. So, I don't know. I'm just really, to be honest with you, I really am disappointed with you, because I figured since you knew about this library, you would have started your fundraising a long time ago. That's why I was upset. And Kelvin can tell you that. So they couldn't believe why you didn't start when you wanted it.
I can speak to that a little bit. We really couldn't start until we know what our design is and we have something to show people. It's hard to fundraise when you don't have anything. And we have talked to people over time. That was part of the feasibility study, was learning. And many people we spoke with said they wanted to know that the city was committed, and at that time they weren't. So they're really waiting for this to happen so that they can say, yes, now we're ready to give.
But Sharon, I thought that when I was on the board on this council in 2016, we told you, I got the impression we all gave you, said we were committed, that we're going to do the library, we're going to give you so much money, from the Crocker School, rather, we're going to do the Crocker School, we're going to do that, and we were going to do the Palace, City Hall, and that's what I thought, so I figured you took it for granted that, there we go. We got the okay, and we're going to do it.
Right. At that point, it was the okay to apply for the grant. And we had to wait until the grant is offered to us from the state, till we actually come up on the list for you to vote on the project itself. You were only voting last time to allow us to apply.
And now we know a lot more, and we're in a state of designing for real, not just proving we could do it.
Now, let me ask you. Well, I'm going to ask the young man right there in the middle in the blue shirt, the blue sports coat. If we held off because we have a place right down here, like we did with the city hall, put the library down there for time being, I understand what you told us about Crocker Elementary School. I understand that. But I personally believe that the materials are going to start going down. It's going to happen because we're going to be going, you can see it now, we're going to have they're claiming a recession coming. So things are going to happen. And the materials are going to go down. And I would rather go back to the 31 million that we talked about when I told Calvin it was 31.5, I believe. That's how I came up with my numbers, and I said, and that. So I know what you're going to tell me. No, we got to go with it right away because you don't understand. We don't know what's going to happen down the future. Well, the thing I don't understand either, well, you're saying the same thing. Kelvin writes us all a letter, and he tells us everything, and he's telling us our finances in the next 3 to 5 years are very critical, very, 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 very tight. So we got no room for anything, none. According to the letter, the way I'm reading it, there's no room. And that's what I get nervous about. There's no room for anything. And I want to help you guys out. I have a grandkid that goes here to the library. Anyway, all right, I yield the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Cragen.
I just wanted to say, are we ready to make a motion on the library? I would like to make a motion on accepting loan order number 227-22.
Second.
I have a motion and second. On the motion, I'd like to briefly comment. First, just a quick response on the issue of fundraising. I think we all need to bear in mind that we're talking about millions of dollars of fundraising. This isn't like, fundraising for a class trip or something like that. This isn't going to be raised through spaghetti suppers and bake sales. This is, you've got to go to people who have a significant chunk of change. And in those people's world, a commitment that isn't legally binding isn't a commitment. Until the city actually puts money on the table, as far as the donors are concerned, we haven't actually made any commitment yet. Now we have put money on the table, or at least presumably we will if this passes. And then I would assume a lot of the donors who the building committee is hoping to tap for this will be a lot more interested in putting up their own money. It would be wonderful, certainly, if it turns out the fundraising is drastically more successful than anticipated and we're able to, reduce our municipal outlay by a significant amount, by, an additional $4 million or something. But I would agree, there was no real feasibility to start fundraising prior to the design and the loan order and so forth. The other thing I'd just like to say is I am really looking forward to seeing this project go forward. Unlike Councillor Gianatali, my daughter will actually be at just the perfect age to start going to story times and things like that when the library is ready to reopen. I practically grew up in the building. I was there probably 4 or 5 times a week most of the time, and I would very much like for my daughter to be able to have that same experience. It's a valuable resource for the community in more ways than we could readily enumerate here at the council. And frankly, it would be great if we weren't dealing with rising construction costs and all that. My feeling on this, though, is I wish we had 80 million to commit to it. We don't, obviously, but I wish we did. Because it's a worthwhile endeavor, and one thing that I don't know if has been mentioned yet, people have said this will be a big part of the revitalization effort. It will draw people downtown who can then patronize the businesses that we are trying to get to come in here. Anything that brings people down to Main Street is going to help those businesses. I mean, take a long-standing business, for example, espressos. There were a lot of times that either I or friends of mine would meet at the library for something and get pizza afterwards, either on the way home or at the restaurant or whatever. That's the kind of thing that makes our downtown a destination again. That said, I know I had Councilors Cruz and DiNatale had indicated they wish to speak on the motion. Councilor Cruz?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to comment that I think it's fair to wonder how this board, this trustees, the volunteers are going to come up with this large amount of money. But when was the feasibility study done again? 2006? 2016. So this was done in 2016. That is what the study, that is the figure that the study said that they could accomplish. And I don't know how it's working in other municipalities, but I, for one, am incredibly grateful and proud that we have a board of trustees willing to show up and say, we're going to do this for our community. We're going to come up with $3.5 million because that's what we can do. And it's disrespectful and rude to criticize them and discourage them and complain that they couldn't do more.
Counselor, yes, we can't.
The body is allowed to talk about the behavior.
The body is not allowed to criticize the. I don't have the rule in front of me to quote from.
It wasn't a personal remark. It was critical of comments made.
Counselor, a point of order is not an opportunity for debate.
I apologize.
We do have a rule that stipulates that councilors cannot criticize the manner or subject matter of another councilor's commentary, but only the concept, basically. I'm paraphrasing from memory badly, but yes, I understand your frustration, but I do have to enforce the rules as written.
Understood. But I do want to reiterate, I'm incredibly proud of that board for its stepping up with that $3.5 million. I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would second that. I am very grateful to the work that the board has done. Councilor DiNatale.
Yeah, just for context on the concept of we've maxed out. The city of Fitchburg, like most, if not all of the municipalities, have always historically maxed out on their borrowing capacity. That doesn't mean they can't borrow anymore. They can't borrow of a large scale. They still have free cash. They still have stabilization. They still can do short-term borrowing. When I entered the council in 2008, there were two major projects that were being funded in the debt service, and that was the high school and the fire station. Every year that former Mayor Lisa Wong was in office, she would tell us, and she was correct, when it came to either the City Hall building or the library or anything else we had to do of a substantial nature, we could not do it until 2019. Because in 2019 is when those two projects would have been paid off. It was transparent and clear to the public for her entire administration, and this one up to 2019. It's why there were several things that we probably should have done sooner that we could not because we were waiting for that end point. And it's no different than someone's house or someone's business. You borrow what you can afford. We are borrowing what we can afford. But yeah, can we borrow something for 15, 20 million in addition? No, we can't. But that's not like, that's not unprecedented. That's the norm. So we always talked about in 2019, when everything was paid off, we would always have Crocker, the library, City Hall, and other small projects. It was always on this sheet. So we're not maxing out on anything. Everything has been transparent to the public. And if the public doesn't know that by now, then with all due respect, they just haven't been paying attention. This is what has always been the case in terms of funding. And on concept, I just want to make it clear that I heard this evening about one of the projects we have already done. The individual who made that comment about it, he voted for the project. Thank you.
Councillor Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to speak that I'm strongly in favor of this project. I think this is an important institution in our city and an anchor in our downtown. Earlier, we discussed a school that educates our youth. This is an institution that serves the whole range of the city, from young to old, to rich to poor, to white to dark. Everybody benefits from the library, and I think this is a great project that we have, and I'm glad we have this opportunity to fund it. I do want to take the time to thank our former director, Ms. Bernard, for being here in getting us to this point where we can move forward. And I also want to welcome our new director, Ms. Hinkle, who's either coming on at the worst possible time or the best time. I hope you have a good appetite for challenges, because you'll have a few in the next couple of years. But I'm sure everything will go well, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Councillor Schultz.
I just want to say I support the project, and I love the design and what it's going to bring to Main Street, and I'm real happy that we're going to be able to do it finally. Thank you.
All right, I have a motion and second to approve the loan order. Do I have any objections? Seeing none, it is approved. And that concludes the agenda for council as a whole this evening.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Actually, I apologize. One moment. I do have one announcement. The Stratton Players will be presenting Love and Laughs Short Play Festival of Comedies at Smokestack Roasters Friday, September 16th at 7:30 and Saturday, September 17th at 4 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Tickets are $15, available at DeBonis and Davin, Smokestack Roasters, and at the door. Youth 18 and under, just $5 when accompanied by a paying adult. And you can visit strattonplayers.com for more information. I have a motion and second to adjourn. If there is no objection, we are adjourned.